everybody that's been combating this virus. So let's take 30 seconds in silence to show respect for them. Thank you very much. And we wish you all a safe journey ahead. It will not be easy, but collectively together we'll make it through. So let me now officially start the program. The title of the session today is Micro, Small, and Medium-Sized Enterprises Day, First Responders to Societal Needs. Today is 25 June 2020. I would like to read our message for the day, collectively done with our partners, and that is the Permanent Mission of Argentina, UNCTAD, DESA, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and ICSB. These are all our co-organizers and hosts, and I want to send them a big thank you and gratitude. Let me now start the session by giving you a brief background. In preparing for micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs 2020, we must not only recognize the necessity and power of MSMEs worldwide, but also we must capture this opportunity to really be with MSMEs. The act of being included, sitting and listening to the struggles and success stories and experiences and opportunities of MSMEs. Due to the extreme losses touching every nation and every sector of industry, there are many people without jobs who and will continue to be looking for entrepreneurship opportunities. The motivations of entrepreneurs and MSMEs can be leveraged to tackle the world's problem while helping to implement the SDGs, especially in these underperforming sectors and in social recovery. We truly believe in the power of MSMEs, and therefore our goals for the future are not just lofty ideals. Rather, these recovery goals stem from the real and tangible examples set by MSMEs worldwide as first responses to societal needs. To address these challenges, and in celebration of MSME Day on 27 June, the Permanent Mission of Argentina, UNCTAD, DESA, UNIDO, and ICSB will be holding this virtual session today, 25 June 2020. This event will bring together ministers, high-level policymakers, leadership of major international organizations, business associations, academia, and other key stakeholders in the private and public sector to contribute to a collective voice of MSME solidarity. This is the background and the mission and the vision of today's date. With that, I would like now to open up with the Secretary General's opening statement for MSME Day. Thank you very much. I would like to read this statement on behalf of all the co-hosts and co-organizers. As I mentioned earlier, this is one voice reading it on behalf of all of us. This is the Secretary General's statement. Message of the Secretary General, Micro, Small, and Medium-Sized Enterprises Day, 27 June 2020. Micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, MSMEs, represent around 70% of global employment and provide essential opportunities often for the most vulnerable, including women and youth. They also make up nearly half of the GDP in developing countries, playing a critical role in advancing shared prosperity. This year's Micro, Small, and Medium-Sized Enterprises Day is being observed during a time of unprecedented and compounding difficulties. The COVID-19 pandemic has unleashed a global socio-economic crisis, upending the livelihoods and well-being of millions of workers, disproportionately hurting low-wage jobs and widening inequalities. In the face of these challenges, we have launched the United Nations Framework for the immediate socio-economic response to COVID-19, highlighting the need to protect jobs, small businesses, and vulnerable workers in the informal economy. We have also established the Response and Recovery Fund to support member states' efforts. Governments must not only support the MSMEs' efforts to weather the current storm, but also provide sustained support in building resilience to other external shocks. The health and livelihoods of many communities depends on it. On this day, I urge everyone to create an enabling environment for these enterprises to build back and thrive. Let us harness the power of micro, small, and medium enterprises, recover better, and achieve the sustainable developments for all. This is from Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. We thank him on behalf of all the organizers and all MSMEs worldwide. Next, I would like to introduce our next speaker here. But before I do so, as was mentioned earlier and with the Secretary General, COVID-19 has affected everyone. No, this virus does not see anyone different than anybody else. It's blind, yet it touches us tremendously here. Stating this, right, our dear colleague and the ambassador of the mission of Argentina has been affected with it. And it took him a long time to recover. But I am pleased and excited to announce that he is recovering safely at home, and he sends his kind regards to everyone and to all MSMEs worldwide. So Ambassador Garcia Moritan, we wish you the best, and we hope to see you soon again with us. Now, it is my honor to introduce Mr. Alejandro Verdier, Charge d'Affaires AI of Argentina to the United Nations, to give us a live statement. Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear friend Ayman. Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, it is a pleasure to be here with all of you today to commemorate Micro, Small, and Medium-Sized Enterprises Day. The mission of Argentina is very pleased to co-organize this event with excellent partners from the United Nations like DESA, UNCTAD, and UNIDO, as well as with International Council for Small Businesses, who supported us in 2017 when we decided to present a resolution in the UN establishing June 27 as MSMEs Day. This year is a very particular one. We are meeting virtually instead of in person because of the pandemic. This issue has disrupted our lives in ways we could have not imagined. And the mission of Argentina has been, as Ayman said, much affected since Ambassador Martin Garcia Moritan is still recovering from this disease. MSMEs have not been the exception regarding economic difficulties related to COVID-19. On the one hand, the shorten on labor cost by workers getting sick or needing to take care of dependents, as well as isolation measures taken to prevent the spread of the disease, have affected the supply side. On the other hand, there was a loss of demand, which affected the income of SMEs and their ability to cope with a critical situation. Before the pandemic, even though there was a wide acknowledgement of MSMEs' importance to national economies, they faced roadblocks such as informality, low productivity, and scarce access to finance. This and many other challenges have been exacerbated during this year. Many countries, including Argentina, have tried to help these enterprises with different programs and relief measures, like credit guarantees for banks, reduction and or deferral of payments of taxes or wage support, among others. But we should try to find ways to incorporate these enterprises in our response to the pandemic and subsequent recovery, since they can become the engines that sustain growth for long-term development in developing countries. In addition, by encouraging the alignment of their strategies with the SDGs, these enterprises can help achieve many of them, since they can contribute to the improvement of the quality of the environment and combat of climate change impacts. The achievement of gender equality and also the empowerment of all women and girls, the reduction of inequalities, the promotion of innovation, and many other goals. We hope, dear friends, that this event and the presentations we are going to listen help us come up with fresh ideas and share experiences that contribute to the improvement of the situation of MSMEs worldwide. Thank you very much, and I wish you an excellent event.
Thank you, Mr. Alejandro Verdier, Charge d'Affaires AI of Argentina to United Nations. We appreciate your time and effort for this. We also would like to recognize Argentina for taking the lead in creating this day. Out of the 75 years of the United Nations, there are about 113 or 115 days commemorating special issues or challenges that the United Nations goes behind and supports. In Argentina, we are very proud to have you dedicate and lead this day for MSMEs. We appreciate it. We also would like to recognize Mr. Guido Cernak, working at the Mission of Argentina, for helping put this day through all the different processes at the United Nations. We appreciate him and thank him tremendously. You will go down in history as leading this MSME Day, and the whole world would like to recognize Argentina and everybody working in the Mission of Argentina for your hard work. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to introduce the President-elect of the International Council for Small Business to introduce the following speakers. Dr. Winslow Sargent, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Greetings, everyone. My name is Winslow Sargent, President-elect of the International Council for Small Business. We're pleased to, once again, to participate in the 4th Annual MSME Day. The next speaker is Mr. Mukisa Kituyi, Secretary General, UNCTAD. The floor is yours, Secretary General. I believe you're muted.
You can't hear me still?
Yes, now we hear you fine.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Yes, I started by congratulating you, Mr. President, and on behalf of UNCTAD, express my appreciation also to the government of Argentina and the sister organizations that have partnered on this important initiative. Today, on the brink of marking this International Day for micro, small, and medium enterprises, we should show our fidelity to the cause of small businesses, first by understanding the unique way in which they are impacted by the COVID pandemic, but also by trying to proffer some suggestions on how they can mitigate the impact, but also recover better after the crisis. We at UNCTAD see the global impact of the COVID not only as dramatic affecting everybody, but impacting small and medium enterprises, particularly in a uniquely hard way. For example, our World Investment Report 2020 projects that global FDI flow will decline to about 40% on average this year compared to last year. And to put this into perspective, the net effect will be that for the first time since the year 2005, global FDI will be below $1 trillion. This is, for many developing countries, vulnerable economies, it represents a very negative drain on resources and very, very, very significant impact on their livelihoods. Secondly, the challenges for small business is substantially related to pre-COVID, pre-existing conditions, which have been exacerbated by the pandemic. If you look at the last 10 years, the global recovery from the crisis of 2008 remained very soft, unequal, and insufficient. What has happened now is that even the modest gains of that soft decade have been wiped out in a period of a few months in the first half of 2020. One of the most important pre-existing conditions for small business was the new trends in international investment, which showed the shortening of value chains, higher concentration of value added, declining international investment in fiscal productive assets, driven by technology and the rise in economic nationalism and the geopolitical tensions associated with technology competitions. These not only affected global investment, but they made it very difficult for small enterprises, which typically in manufacturing sectors find a niche in global production networks. When those networks are disrupted, already major vulnerabilities are first seen in small enterprises. Secondly, in many developing countries, the largest number of small enterprises are in the service sector. Service sector, which is extremely important in most of these countries. Globally, for example, tourism may account for only 10% of global GDP. In small island developing countries, it accounts for 30%. In islands like Maldives, or Grenada, and St. Kitts and Nevis, it accounts for more than 50% of GDP. So the virtual collapse of tourism, 80% decline on average, the death of the air transport industry for tourism has a major impact, not only in contracting the hospitality industry, but the most vulnerable segment to go are the small and medium enterprises, particularly those that are led by women, who usually are typical to be found in the food supply services, in the hospitality industry, last on board, first off board. Similarly, small enterprises in agriculture. From my own country, Kenya, we saw that a 3-week disruption in the flight of flowers to Europe could wipe out the life savings of small entrepreneurs who have been involved in the floriculture industry. So these are consequences that are very overwhelming and very personal for a lot of the vulnerable groups. How can we assist in this? First and foremost, that state stimulus programs should be modeled in such a way that they're not just responsive to the larger enterprises who have an easier fiscal address, who have easier communication with the state entities, but can also reach small and even informal enterprises where mitigating the very real challenges of livelihoods are there. Similarly, we have to understand that many small enterprises are in a uniquely vulnerable situation, because whether you are running, you are a bumper tender at a petrol station, a fuel station, or you are running a small corner store with groceries, you are in the likely situation of physical contact with a lot more people than normal during lockdown. And therefore, you are more exposed to the possibilities of contracting the virus than a lot of others. So we have to see the unique need, even health-wise, of mitigating the impact on these groups. Finally, we have to prepare, if we are preparing for recovering better, we have to start addressing the challenges of resourcing in the small enterprises, inadequate policy environment for small businesses prior to the COVID, but also looking at how to shield the gains socially that were made before the crisis from being wiped out by the hostile structural reform processes that will be coming up as credit dries up and resources are targeted at areas that are more attractive to policymakers in most developing countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Amtad. Your address really highlights the fact that the challenges that MSMEs have faced is not only due to COVID. These are some challenges that have existed, and appreciate your address in just highlighting the need for policies and just for forward thinking. Next speaker is Ms. Maria Francesca Spatalisano, the Assistant Secretary General, DESA. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning and thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this event to observe the Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Day is very timely. The international community is calling for urgent, targeted action to implement the ambitious 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals. This will require the full participation of all stakeholders, including the small business enterprises. This year's observance focuses on the important topic of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly those efforts being implemented by countries to address the economic crisis, to avoid a depression, to begin a sustained economic recovery, and minimize the negative effects on livelihoods. Across the world, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises comprise the major share of business entities. They are a major contributor to economic growth and a source of employment and livelihood opportunities, particularly for vulnerable groups of the population. They also promote innovation by providing opportunities for up-and-coming entrepreneurs to manufacture new products, boosting business competition and fueling growth. Hence, protecting and strengthening the resilience of MSMEs, including women-led businesses, has become one of the key action areas of the United Nations framework for the immediate socioeconomic response to COVID-19. I am confident that as MSMEs can be effective first responders to the unfolding health, economic, and social crisis, and in the process contribute to the recovery of the global economy. Small enterprises can also play an important role in combating worsening economic and social inequalities within and between countries. But for these enterprises to effectively contribute to economic recovery and combat inequality, they need to benefit from fiscal stimulus packages and supportive monetary policies that have been rolled out, including access to credit. Bailouts and support measures should not only assist big corporations and medium-sized enterprises, but also micro and small businesses, where women and youth entrepreneurs are more represented. Simply put, we cannot recover together or build more sustainable, peaceful, just, equitable, inclusive, and resilient societies where no one is left behind if we fail to protect and strengthen the resilience of small enterprises. For these enterprises to contribute to the decade of action to deliver the SDGs, they need improved access to markets and technology. Governments should also improve the ease of doing business by reducing or eliminating cumbersome rules and procedures for establishing new enterprise. And as the world moves from the emergency response to recovery phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is also critical to reflect on solutions that improve MSMEs' resilience. In this regard, the United Nations system plays an important role in strengthening the global ecosystem for strengthening the MSMEs' resilience. The establishment of the Response and Recovery Fund by the United Nations Secretary General to support low and middle-income countries overcome the economic and health challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is an important first step. Going forward, more can be done to unlock the potential of partnerships for an inclusive future where no one is left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Day this year, let us continue to highlight the important role of small businesses, not only as engines for job creation, but also as the source of hope and confidence for a better and more inclusive future. Thank you.
Assistant Secretary General Spattasolano, thank you for those kind remarks. Partnerships are needed. We have to bring partners together for us to solve some of these challenges. Next speaker will be Mr. Lee Yong, the Director General, UNIDO. Please play the video.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to have this opportunity to address you on MSME Day to recognize a group of businesses that play an important role in most economies in the world, in particular in developing countries. Micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises account for 70% of employment. Many of them are involved in industrial activities, and a considerable number of them are directly linked to global, regional, and local value chains and clusters. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to place an immense strain on societies and economies around the globe, firms, particularly MSME, face serious risks of being unable to resume their business operations, resulting in job and income losses when economic activities are disrupted. The recovery of MSME is fundamental as long as the pandemic is not sufficiently contained. Preparation for business continuity by MSME will remain a challenge. Recovery and business continuity are important elements to ensure that negative impact of current crisis is minimized and resilience enhanced. UNIDO's response framework to the COVID-19 crisis is to prepare for the health crisis and contain economic consequences, to respond with inclusive and sustainable solutions, and building resilience and adapt the productive sector, and to recover and transform through inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Our response will prioritize the rescuing of MSME and the industrial ecosystems because they drive the value creation of the countries and generate employment and incomes for households. I'm pleased to inform you that UNIDO has recently launched a COVID-19 industrial recovery program focusing on MSME and a guidance for MSMEs outlining a pathway to business continuity and recovery from the current crisis. At the same time, the crisis also provides opportunities to transform industrial activities in order to increase inclusiveness and sustainability. Our support will prepare countries as they adjust to the new normal, which could be characterized by, for example, structural shifts towards fourth industrial revolution, clean energy, low carbon solutions, transition towards circular economies, as well as adoption of integrated solutions for food system. It will aim to contain the effects of the crisis, respond and adapt to the emergency, and ultimately recover from the socio-economic shock, taking the opportunities to transform into inclusive, resilient, and sustainable economies.
Well, thank you, Director General Lee. those words of resiliency, sustainability, and adaptability are words that MSMEs have known for quite some time, and your comment and your partnership is very much welcome. Thank you. Next speaker is Dr. Ayman El-Tarabishi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Winslow. I would like to introduce now the president of ICSB, Mr. Ahmed Osman.
Greetings and happy MSME Day. The importance of micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, in the national economies is very well known, as well as their global impact, since by number, they dominate the world business stage. When ICSB, with the support of Argentina, decided to present a resolution to the United Nations to establish June 27th as MSMEs Day, our idea was to showcase the importance of these enterprises in the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is with great satisfaction that we witness the visibility of MSMEs has been increasing since the adoption of this resolution. Previously, the work done at the United Nations was more at a technical level, with specific agencies working on high-level documents and across the globe. They create most of the employment and represent more than 90% of the business population. They are the key to creating 600 million new jobs that will be needed by 2030 to keep pace with the growth of the world's working age population. The potential impact on achieving many of the Sustainable Development Goals is much greater than their size might indicate. However, the contribution of MSMEs to sustainable development is constrained by at least 3 factors. First of all, unfavorable business environments. Secondly, inadequate access to finance. And thirdly, the barriers that face MSMEs in their potential development. Policymakers set the environment that enables entrepreneurship and a vibrant business sector to develop. Many developing countries have embarked on reforms to facilitate business development. Governments can also take measures to support innovation by MSMEs and foster their participation in the economy. One good example of such policy change is in India, where the government recently amended its public procurement policy to increase the minimum percentage of goods and services public entities must procure from small enterprises. It has also included a provision mandating that the minimum proportion of public procurement be sourced from micro and small enterprises owned by women. Well-functioning, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure is also key to business development. In the growing world of digitization, e-commerce opened new trade opportunities for MSMEs. However, many developing countries, particularly in the African continent, remain relatively underconnected to the internet and thus to e-commerce platforms. It is estimated that more than a third of the African population is out of reach of an operational fiber optic transmission network, while only 17% of those living in LDCs used the internet in 2017. This underlines the importance of increasing investment in IT and communication technology. Secondly, bridging the financing gap. Despite some improvement, MSMEs continue to identify a lack of adequate financing as its biggest obstacle to growing their business. The MSME financing gap is estimated to be over $5 trillion. Female-owned businesses, typically smaller than those of male-owned, account for an outsized share of the financing gap, representing 28% of business establishments and 32% of the MSME financing gap. Financial constraints also prevent MSMEs from fully taking part in international trade. To bridge the MSME financing gaps, countries should consider harnessing technology, building an institutionally diversified banking sector, and designing the adequate supporting tools. Many MSMEs in sectors integral to attaining the Sustainable Development Goals, going through this global coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, MSMEs in many sectors integral to attaining the Sustainable Development Goals have faced a lot of obstacles. Through their core business activities, MSMEs contribute to achieving Sustainable Development Goals in their own countries. Micro and small and medium enterprises often deliver water and sanitation services in many low and middle income countries. They help achieve adequate sanitation and hygiene, including those in the most vulnerable populations. In the health sectors, SMEs in the developing world produce drugs, facilitate transportation of blood, run hospitals, and provide a range of goods and services. Similarly, SMEs provide a huge range of services in the education sector in many developing countries, where investments in their competitiveness improve the quality of education and thus the human capital of the workforce. Innovative energy firms can use new technologies to improve access to modern and sustainable energy services. Moreover, competitive family firms can improve food security and reduce hunger through the sustainable use of mountain, wetland, and dryland ecosystems. Businesses are key to Sustainable Development Goals 8 and 9. By identifying which of the SDG targets SMEs can contribute to and via which channels, it is possible to illustrate the importance of these channels by Sustainable Development Goal. This shows that SMEs can contribute in some measures to 60% or more of the targeted SDGs. The goals affected mostly by SMEs are SDG 8, which is the promotion of sustained and inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all, which 83% of targets impacted by at least one of the 4 SME channels. And SDG 9, building resilient infrastructure and promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization and foster innovation. This is very important that we all consider that SMEs are very, very important to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is very, very important that policymakers, practitioners, researchers all come together to support small business owners. Small business owners are at the heart of developing communities, of developing local economies, and for creating decent jobs. In the end, I would like to thank and wish all small business owners worldwide a happy MSME Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Osman, President of ICSB. We also would like to recognize you on the importance of offering women entrepreneurs opportunities for procurement. This is a very important point, and we want to congratulate you on an exceptional job with the ICSB World Congress last year and to come back again to speak on behalf of ICSB. We appreciate you. Next, it is my great honor to introduce His Excellency Mr. Vincent Moritan, Vice President and Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development of the Republic of Seychelles. The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, Secretary General of UNCTAD, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from the Seychelles. It is an honor for us to participate in such an august event to mark the International Day of the MSME, especially in a year where MSMEs throughout the world have been greatly affected by COVID-19. At the onset, please allow me, on behalf of the Republic of Seychelles, to extend our thoughts and prayers to everyone affected by the virus. We feel fortunate to connect with you all despite the outbreak. I also understand that WebEx, the system we are using to connect to one another today, was created by an entrepreneurial venture in 2007, which gained prominence during the pandemic as an online platform for webinars, virtual meetings, and other fora. It is evident that the impact of technology has grown. It has grown exponentially over the past decade, and that it must be fully utilized by MSMEs to propel themselves to new heights. Seychelles, like any other country, has not been spared by the virus. At the outset of the pandemic, our public health authorities put in place the necessary preventive measures to control its spread. This was made possible through a nationwide effort and drive by the government with the support of the trust and cooperation from the private sector, civil society, religious organizations, the general population, as well as regional and international organizations. From a health perspective, we are recuperating. From an economic standpoint, however, like many other jurisdictions, we are still suffering. More so because as a small island nation, our economy is heavily reliant on tourism. Although the Seychelles International Airport will be reopening next month, it is still too early to predict new travel trends. This is due to the fact that many countries remain on lockdown and we are unsure when tourists will travel to our shores. Last year, we recorded a foreign currency surplus of $45 million, the highest ever. This year, the expectations were even higher in the light of the expected rise in number of visitors. The economy was set to grow by 3.9% compared to 2019. But the outbreak and spread of the virus have left our economy in uncertainty. Data collected by our Seychelles Chamber of Commerce and Industry indicate that MSMEs are most vulnerable to the after effects of COVID-19, given that most of them are highly dependent on the tourism sector. The most evident challenges are financial. To put you into context, please note that in Seychelles, MSMEs are defined as enterprises with an annual turnover of no more than 25 million rupees, equivalent to $1.3 million. Based on the 2019 tax registration data, MSMEs in Seychelles account for 98% of small businesses, and they contribute 16% of GDP and 41% of total employment. The most popular licensable activities are trading, construction, hiring services, accommodation, catering, and entertainment. The pandemic has undeniably affected every business activity and will continue to do so for some time. The uncertainty for those who are self-employed has prompted government to introduce measures to mitigate these negative impacts. From a job retention allowance to a relief loan scheme to tax rebate, Seychelles has adopted internationally recognized relief schemes. The fact that many businesses may have to downsize or even close down is distressing. It is expected that as many as 4,000 employees may lose their jobs by the end of the year, 20 of them being from the micro and small enterprises. The government has therefore introduced SETS, the Seychelles Employee Transition Scheme, to bring together people made redundant as well as self-employed and business persons whose companies have shut down with a view to retraining, reskilling them, or giving them an opportunity for temporary job placement. Ladies and gentlemen, the incremental implementation of measures to restore our economy remains necessary. We are slowly opening our borders to the outside world, bearing in mind that the virus has not gone away and that we must adopt a COVID-ready attitude in the new normal. Seychelles is systematically reshaping its entrepreneurial landscape against this background, but with ambitious and realistic approaches. Entrepreneurship in Seychelles embraces the spirit of the recently approved National Development Strategy, paying particular attention to people at the center of development, innovative economy, and economic transformation whilst addressing the SDGs. To that end, in early 2019, the Department of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development requested UNCTAD to assist in establishing the Seychelles Entrepreneurship Policy Framework. The call was promptly and positively responded to and kicked off with a survey with key representatives from the public, private, academia, and non-governmental sectors. To provide further in-depth consultation, representatives of government and other stakeholders were invited to attend a consultative workshop to prepare for the investment of the policy review in Seychelles and remove obstacles to investment and fostering entrepreneurship development. UNCTAD is now called upon to bring forth selected policy options that will enable government and its partners to begin the strategy formulation process. Additionally, with the support of UNCTAD again, Seychelles has secured Empretec. Together with SETS, Empretec, once the necessary funding will have been acquired, can bring many opportunities for both entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. These efforts will inculcate an entrepreneurial spirit within our people, particularly the youth. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take the opportunity to express our gratitude to UNCTAD for providing Seychelles with their time, skills and knowledge to help us identify the opportunities that exist for entrepreneurs, the challenges that entrepreneurs face, help devise a framework for entrepreneurship policy for our future generation. Your patience and determination during this time will help Seychelles overcome future calamities. I hope that your discussions will be fruitful and that it will give us all an opportunity to build back better through promoting inclusion and solidarity. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Vincent Moritan, Vice President and Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development of the Republic of Seychelles. Your message of resiliency and hard work and innovation is well received. And we would also like to thank the excellent work of UNCTAD doing with the Seychelles. Thank you very much. Next, it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Hala El Sayed, Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Arab Republic of Egypt.
I'm Hala Said, Minister of Planning and Economic Development, the Arab Republic of Egypt. I would like to seize this opportunity to wish you all a happy UN SME Day, the day that we celebrate every year, which is the 27th of June. Governments throughout the world agree that entrepreneurship is the road to innovation, productivity, employment, and growth. The number of SME enterprises in Egypt reached 1.7 million. They employ 5.8 million individuals, representing almost 43% of the total employment in the formal private sector. SMEs are central to achieving Egypt's national vision, Vision 2030, as they are the main avenue for achieving inclusive and equitable growth, which we are really focused on, and generating employment opportunities. At the time when the world declared COVID-19 as a global pandemic, Egypt was reaping the fruits of its macroeconomic reform program that resulted in achieving a growth rate of 5.6%. Similarly, we witnessed a decrease in unemployment rate to drop to 7.7%, decrease in inflation to about 5%, increase in FDI by 20%. However, the pandemic will certainly have negative effects on these developments. Globally, GDP is projected to decline by almost about 7.9%. Global debt levels are estimated to soar to 300% or more of the world's GDP, and of course a decrease in world trade, decrease in FDI, and decrease in remittances by almost 30%. The Egyptian government implemented a sizable targeted fiscal stimulus to act as a stabilizer during this period of the pandemic. This time of the crisis proves more and more the importance of the SME sector. One of the key dimensions to the government's approach is to integrate the sector within the formal economy, to facilitate its access to finance, to provide more incentives to this sector, and in addition to accommodate and facilitate more institutional reforms to the sector. The new law facilitates the allocation of land for the SME sector, which can be used as a collateral to facilitate borrowing. The law encourages startups through a number of channels, including the exemption of startup from patent filing files, as well as technical and financial assistance for registered patents. Institutionally, we have made a lot of institutional amendments by having one institutional now, the medium, small, and micro agency, acting as one agency responsible for supporting the MSME sector financially and also as a policy support and strategy development, in addition to a legislative and regulatory institution. The Egyptian government also believes in capacity building and in human development. So we have invested a lot to act as the main catalyst for achieving new innovators and new capacity building. The government has invested a lot, and we do believe that the need to change the mindset of our young people in order to value self-employment and entrepreneurship compared to the formal and the official employment. The Ministry of Planning and Economic Development specifically have invested in a lot of capacity building programs in cooperation with universities and of course in cooperation with the top first-class educational and capacity building institutions. In addition to that, the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development is very keen in providing the proper ecosystem to help in building the right caliber for the SME sector through linking this training with different incubators in different universities, establishing a business leaders observatory to continuously update a national database on a quarterly basis. We do believe that in order to build on the future opportunities that the crisis has created for our SME sector, we need new and creative approaches to respond to traditional and new challenges. We do believe that we have wealth of knowledge, we have a wealth of human capital that we need to capitalize on. We're working on all these fronts to facilitate all access to information, access to ICT, access to innovation. We must create channels of communication with the global economy and with the global supply chain in order to provide the proper support for the SME sector. Finally, I'd like to stress on the importance of capacity building and digital capacity building, as these remain the key determinant for the success and the resilience of the SME sector.
I would like to thank Her Excellency, Dr. Hala El Sayed, Minister of Planning and Economic Development. Your message is clear about the importance of capacity and human development. It has to be an actual inclusive ecosystem. We recognize the importance of public and private and education all working together. We also would like to acknowledge the excellent work our colleagues are doing in Egypt, including the American University of Cairo and Tibet. Well done, everybody. With that, I would like to also now share the floor with Dr. Winslow Sargent. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. El Tarabishi. The next speaker is His Excellency Sultan bin Saeed Al Mansouri, Minister of Economy, United Arab Emirates.
Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my country, the United Arab Emirates, I am very pleased to participate in this global event and also assert that the UAE extends its full support to the General Assembly of the United Nations resolution of the 6th of April 2017 on dedicating MSMEs Day in an act of support and solidarity with the entrepreneurs worldwide. As the world continues to combat the COVID-19 for months now, with enormous impact on health and global economy, governments all over the world continue to struggle to combat the virus and its negative impact, with approximately $8 trillion thus far, with emphasis on supporting MSMEs as they represent the backbone of the national and global economies. In the UAE, the government was among the first countries in the world to quickly launch two stimulus economic packages worth around $77 billion, in addition to the economic stimulus packages on the local levels. The MSMEs is a highly important sector in the UAE economy, and it represents almost 98% of the total registered companies. The UAE government is committed to maintain the UAE as a highly attractive global hub for entrepreneurship. Now, despite the economic challenges that the world is currently facing because of the COVID-19, we must unite in efforts and coordinations to combat this virus and to expedite our economic and trade cooperation. The UE proposes focusing on the following steps for the way forward. Number one, the global economy needs to be transformed into digital economy as soon as possible, and also to facilitate trade with the least possible obstacles. Number two, there is an urgent need for reassessment of the currently applied global supply chain system and also provide a better and more pragmatic model. Number three, the new model to support and finance MSMEs is highly needed during this crisis, but also in the future. I want to thank you, and I wish your conference all success.
Well, thank you, Minister El Mansouri. Those words of a plan, especially, is very much needed as we chart our recovery from the effects of COVID-19. Next speaker, His Excellency, Mr. Teton Masduki, Minister of Cooperation and SMEs, Indonesia.
I'm Teton Masduki, Minister of Cooperative and SMEs of the Republic Indonesia. Would like to wish you all a happy UN SME Day, which we celebrate every year on 27th of June. I'm so happy to know from my predecessor, Mr. Cruz Payoga, that in 2016, Indonesia was one among the 7 countries who initiated and declared the SME Day by delivering his speech at the United Nations headquarters in New York. I am also grateful that ICSB Indonesia are always supporting governance efforts in strengthening the entrepreneurship aspect of SMEs in Indonesia. During this COVID-19 pandemic, our President Joko Widodo has allocated enormous attention, energies, and monies to protect and shape our SME, ensuring the day will sustain in the future. Postponement of financial obligation, tax incentive, loan restructuring, and free skill training for SME are among the policy. On top of that, our ministry is now working seriously to support the digitalization of SME, since currently most of them are still traditionally run. We are fully aware that COVID-19 pandemic is a serious yet painful wake-up call for all SMEs to make speedy transformation. One of them is by being more digitalized in running their business. Apart from that, we are lucky that Indonesia already has 5 unicorns, a country with the largest number of unicorns within ASEAN region. They are Gojek, Tokopedia, Traveloka, Bukalapak, and OVO. I believe that synergy between this unicorn along with other online platforms and millions of SMEs will truly empower the economy engine, both for local and international markets. I am also very confident that the Indonesian millennials are our real creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial assets that define the future of the nation. I am so excited and proud to inform you that in 2030, Indonesia will reach the peak of its demographic bonus, the same year that United Nations has projected to be the ultimate year of Sustainable Development Goal or SDG. By aligning and integrating those two events, demographic bonus of Indonesia and 17 principle of UN SDG, I have my personal confidence that we will be able to achieve the golden era of Indonesian SME in 2030. Indonesia SMEs invite you from all over the world to welcome the new World SME Decade into the glorious year of 2030. Let us collaborate more closely with the United Nations and ICSB Worldwide Network. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, Minister Mastuki. We appreciate the leadership of the permanent mission of Indonesia to the UN and the work that you're doing, especially around MSMEs and the unicorns. You've shown that success can be had, and look forward to seeing more successes from Indonesia. Next speaker is His Excellency Prince Constantine Van Orange, leader of TechLeap.nl, the Netherlands.
Thank all that have been working very hard to establish MSME Day at the UN. This size companies, small size companies, are the backbone of the economy. 90% of all companies are small, medium or micro sized, and they are employing about 60% of the total workforce. But rarely this category of companies is overlooked, simply because they don't have the lobbying power that bigger companies have. But today's acknowledgement helped raise that awareness, raise the awareness about the relevance of these firms and the relevance also of fostering entrepreneurship, because we need more entrepreneurs. I myself represent Startup Delta, the organization in the Netherlands that supports entrepreneurship startups to grow faster and to have better opportunities in the market. And it's never been easier to start a company than today, because of the technologies, because of the markets that they're opening. And we should take this momentum, like you're doing at the UN today, to foster entrepreneurship, foster small, medium and micro-sized enterprises, and give them the platform that they need. So once again, we'd like to congratulate you with this day and hope that it will benefit the future of small, medium-sized micro enterprises globally.
Thank you, Prince Constantine. Thank you for those words. Thank you for the work that you've done with not only with TechLeap.nl, but with Startup Delta and the work that is coming out of the Netherlands. Your leadership and your attention to the MSME sector speaks to the importance of the contribution of entrepreneurs and startups. I will now pass back the baton to Dr. Ayman El-Tarabishi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Winslow. And with that, I want to thank all the speakers that went before us here. A big, heartfelt thank you. And finally, we have to also thank the following. First of all, this is our 4th MSME year, and we want to congratulate and thank the continuous support of the UN Office of Partnerships. We recognize you. We appreciate all the hard work you have given us here, and we hope to see you again. And I know you have been supporting us with this one as well. Thank you very much. Also, we would like to recognize and thank the mission of Korea, Ambassador Oh Jun, the 71st President of ECOSOC, Dr. Kishan Kim, and the former Ambassador of the mission of Korea, Ambassador Tal Yol. We want to thank you again for your continuous support. We also would like to thank the mission of Egypt for their support from the beginning of this endeavor here. We want to thank you and we wish you the best. And also we want to recognize the excellent and innovative work of Tatwir Mas in Egypt. The work you are doing is well recognized. Also, we would like to thank and recognize the United Arab Emirates University. They sent students last year. We remember you. We miss you. We hope to see you again. And also the excellent work that Sharjah is doing and the American University of Sharjah. We recognize your work and we acknowledge you and we appreciate you. And also, and this is important here, and I kindly ask all the participants here to give a big applause by saying applause and a big thank you. And this goes in particular to the following. We know you. We see you every year when we come. The staff, the security, the people that are standing on the front line of the UN buildings that let us in every year. We know you. We see you. We recognize you. We miss your smiles. Let's give them a big round of applause. We can't wait to see you guys again next year here. So thank you. Please stay safe, right? And then finally, we want to thank everybody, every single micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise from the Seychelles to Egypt to around the world. We recognize you. Once we finish today, I want you to all go online or to go out physically, but with physical distance, and buy something from a micro business. Buy something from a small business and say, Happy MSME Day, and then tell them what it's all about. That's what it's all about. It's about humanity and MSMEs. With that, we end the opening session. I am honored and delighted to hand over for session number 1, right? And it's called, the session title is Leveraging MSMEs as Change Makers and First Responders to Societal Needs. It is moderated by my dear colleagues, right? Dr. Tatiana Krylova, Head of Enterprise Branch, Division and Investment and Enterprise, UNCTAD in Geneva. And we want to thank her for staying up late so many days trying to put this program together. Amazing work, Tatiana. And also my dear colleague and friend, Ms. Chantal Line-Carpentier, Head of UNCTAD office in New York. Thank you. Without your collaboration, this would have been more difficult. We want to thank you both. You guys are incredible. And we hand it from ICSB to UNCTAD. With that, I want to thank you all, and I see you soon.
Thank you, Ayman. Thank you for such a warm introduction. Excellencies, distinguished speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon to all of you. My name is Tatiana Krylova. I'm Head of Enterprise Branch at UNCTAD. I'm very pleased to invite you to our first discussion panel titled, as Ayman said, Leveraging MSMEs as Change Makers and First Responders to Societal Needs. Together with my colleague Chantal Carpentier, Head of UNCTAD office in New York, we will moderate this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, the advancing contours of pandemic COVID-19 are said to cause the steepest global economic pullback without modern parallel and a sharp adverse thrust on source of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, which provide jobs to about 65–80% of the global workforce. Trapped in the economic stagnation due to the Great Lockdown, MSMEs are the most vulnerable within the private sector. They account for a major share of players in sectors most affected by isolation measures, as was mentioned earlier, such as, for example, catering, tourism, and entertainment. Compared with large firms, MSMEs have fewer resources and low capacities to cope with the abrupt economic shocks. And of course, MSMEs normally do not have diversified business markets and external sources to leverage in the face of crisis. However, while the crisis exposed and deepened pre-crisis fragilities in the SME sector, it also provides an unprecedented opportunity to emerge with a better set of policies and measures for MSME promotion than existed prior to the pandemic. In this respect, UNCTAD can add value to many efforts of its member states on promoting development-oriented entrepreneurship policies based on what we call EPF, Entrepreneurship Policy Framework, which helped many countries to identify, formulate, implement, and assess policies on entrepreneurship and MSME promotion. Coherent and holistic policy measures and initiatives to support and sustain entrepreneurship, including in post-pandemic scenarios, span over several closely interrelated areas, including regulatory reforms, access to finance and markets, training and education, awareness of entrepreneurial opportunities and creation of support networks, technology exchange and innovation, which becomes especially critical in light of accelerated digitalization pushed by the pandemic and which presents an excellent opportunity for the SMEs on their response to the challenges of the current crisis, which is important, and it's very important to utilize this opportunity. Micro and small enterprises will need extensive business management skills and human resources support to cope with the challenges unknown and not expected before the pandemic crisis. In this regard, our Emprotect program, which already was kindly mentioned by Vice President of Seychelles, based on a behavior approach towards unleashing entrepreneurial potential, which is implemented by UNCTAD in about 50 countries, it could be a powerful tool to boost entrepreneurship spirit and capacity of many in need. So the panel is structured in a way to enable us to discuss issues and share experiences of the MSME surge, considering these key interrelated policy elements and that have a highest impact on MSME development, thus enabling them to create change and respond to societal needs to ensure and enhance their contribution to the Sustainable Development Goal implementation, to facilitate inclusive business and empower most vulnerable groups of population, such as youth, women, migrants, and the poor, leaving no one behind. With more than 2/3 of the global population employed by MSMEs, the unprecedented outbreak has vividly shown how tightly their activities are woven into the economic and social fabric of the world, and therefore how fundamental is their role in social and economic resurgence. Concerted and coordinated efforts at all levels and of all relevant stakeholders and quick action in their favor is critical to enable them to play that role. In this regard, I'm really very pleased to announce launch of a new project on global response to post-COVID-19 economic resurgence through the MSME-driven growth in developing countries and economies in transition. The project is implemented with the financial support of the UN Development Account and is built on cooperation of UNCTAD with DESA and all UN regional commissions such as ECE, ESQA, ECLAC, ECA, and ESCAP. So discussions today provide us with an opportunity to have an intermediate impact assessment of the disruption that could lead to a tailored set of policies and practices for immediate basic reopening measures for small business owners, and also to facilitate inclusive resurgence, avoid a prolonged economic collapse, and also develop a longer-term social and economic recovery strategy where the MSMEs play a central role. So the panel brings together policymakers, international organizations, and also entrepreneurs from different parts of the world to address three main questions. What are the daunting challenges faced by MSMEs worldwide, especially those in developing countries? What to do to help them to survive during the pandemic? And also, what is also very important, what to do to make them thrive in the post-COVID-19 era. So with this, I would like to proceed with our panel discussion and give the floor, rather give the screen to our first speaker. To our first speaker, Mr. Unhcr, Director of the Department of Small and Medium Enterprises, General Department of Small and Medium Enterprises and Handicraft, Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation from Cambodia. Please put on the video.
ជំរាបសួរ Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency Ketesitha Bandit Chom Prasit, Senior Minister, Minister of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation, I am very honored to join this event today, which is timely and important at this difficult time when the world is still faced with the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Micro, small and medium enterprises are strategically important for economic growth in developing countries such as Cambodia. MSME provide over 70% job and contribute to GDP around 58% of Cambodia in 2018. Supporting MSME is not highly relevant with economic growth and sustainable development of the country. It is also critical to ensure income and livelihood resources of the vulnerable group of people, especially women and youth. The majority of MSME in Cambodia concentrate their business in the manufacturing, tourism, retail and service sector that are highly vulnerable to shock brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected continuously of MSME from both demand and supply side. From the demand side, for example, the lockdown and the international travel ban imposed internationally to curb the spread of the virus has resulted in the substantial reduction of tourism arriving in Cambodia in 2020. Likewise, it has also brought disruption at the supply side, stopping timely provision of raw material for apparel, footwear, and garment manufacturing factory. Facing the challenge, it is sad to note that a number of MSME were forced to close temporarily. To support business continuity of MSME, the government of Cambodia has launched very effective measures. This included the deployment of stimulus measure of around $2 billion USD that provide low interest loan, tax relief, MSME, and other related issues, direct cost support to the employee. This measure would not only support MSME during the emergency response faced to COVID-19 pandemic, it is also expected to achieve long-lasting impact, improving resilience of MSME in the recovery and rebuilding phase after the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, the government has provided skill training program to reintegration of employees who lost their job due to the pandemic. Partnership with the private sector is also pursued to diversify business model of MSME for enhancing their resilience toward COVID-19 and other external shock in the future. Planning and implementation of the policy have been following an inclusive approach. The high degree of informality among MSME in Cambodia have been well recognized compared to their formal and registered counterpart. Informal MSME tend to benefit less from policy support from the government. To support their continuity and resilience as an integral part of MSME sector in Cambodia, the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation has proactively led the building of the coherent and simplified MSME formalization mechanism in Cambodia. At this point, I would like to thank the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations, UNDESA, for their tireless effort in supporting us building the mechanism. Thanks to the support of UNDESA, the mechanism has been established and policy guideline was published, which provided a clear roadmap for MSME entrepreneurs on steps and requirements needed to register business efficiency. I believe the policy guideline would contribute pivotally to improving policy environment for MSME growth in Cambodia. Ladies and gentlemen, one lesson learned from the COVID-19 crisis could be that the virus knows no border. The world needs solidarity to work together and protect MSME, job as well as hard-won progress toward sustainable development. This is the relevant to developing countries like Cambodia as to developing economy. the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation, Cambodia, would embrace partnership of every kind of international organization and national partner to further improve policy environment for doing business in Cambodia and jointly support contribution of MSME in Cambodia to the resurgence of economic growth and sustainable development after the pandemic. I would like to wish the event a smooth success, and I look forward to continue partnership and getting in touch with you after the event. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your insightful perspective of SME search in Cambodia. Thank you very much for your contribution and useful presentation. So we now move to our next speaker, Ms. Christine Schreiber, who is Director of SME Policy, European Commission's Directorate of Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Ms. Christine, you have the floor. Please.
Good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be invited as a speaker to the United Nations high-level event on the Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Day, our cherished MSME Day. This year's event theme is We Hear You, listening to those at the front lines, to our entrepreneurs, businesses, policymakers. I'm very happy to join the conversation, representing the European Commission, and to reflect on our policies and support of micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, especially in the current unusual times. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a tremendous challenge for all of us, for citizens, businesses and governments. But it has also demonstrated that we need to act together as a global community in order to come out of the crisis stronger, more resilient and sustainable. This means breaking down barriers, sharing best practices and inspiring big ideas. It also means involving all elements of our society and economy in the recovery process. And our micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are key actors here. You all know that small businesses have been most affected by the crisis. They have often been cut off from customers, clients and suppliers, and deprived of precious liquidity. Many have not survived, and many others are only limping through, burning up valuable rainy day reserves. As we in the European Commission are piloting Europe's way out of the crisis, we have put SMEs at the heart of our approach. We want to ensure that our entrepreneurs and businesses get the financial support they need, that they're able to reconnect with suppliers or forge new partnerships and have renewed access to markets in Europe and beyond. We are also aware that we in our companies cannot simply press a reset button. We must ensure that they become more resilient to face future crises. This means adopting and adapting to the digital technologies that have proven so essential in the last months, having access to talent and skills, functioning freely as part of ecosystems and value chains within and across borders. Getting SMEs the right support means that we will not just bounce back from the crisis, we will be able to bounce forward. But it's also clearer than ever that we need to move to a more environmental, social, and economically sustainable business model. The EU is deeply committed to the 2015 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. We are implementing these goals across EU policies, both internally, through the Green Deal, our Circular Economy Action Plan, our industrial and SME strategies, and our gender equality strategy, and externally, in our trade and development actions. The EU is moving ahead on these goals. On Monday, Eurostat, our statistical office, issued a report showing that we have made progress in most areas, but we still have some more work to do in some other areas, such as climate neutrality and gender equality. We are honest about this, and this is why we have prioritized actions in these areas. The sustainability transition is not just the responsibility of public actors and policymakers. It is about actions by everyone, including citizens and businesses. Climate change and the waste of natural resources are issues that affect all of us. We must therefore take a collective approach. SMEs are a leading actor in delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals. In Europe, as in many other parts of the world, they represent 99.8% of all companies in the non-financial sector. They employ around 100 million people and account for more than half of the EU's GDP. Beyond this, SMEs play an important role in local communities across Europe, including in remote and rural areas. Quite a few of them are among the most dynamic, innovative, and forward-looking businesses, already developing environmentally sustainable business practices, products, and services. And many of them receive support from the EU and advice in doing so. Since SMEs are embedded in every region, in every ecosystem, and in every value chain, they help spread innovation and best sustainable practices throughout the world. Combined with their capacity to provide jobs, social security, and training, this helps to remove barriers to delivering the SDGs. Nevertheless, even before the crisis started, our SMEs were already facing many barriers to their full potential. And given their limited human and financial resources, they find it challenging to comply with rules and complex administrative and legal procedures, to access information, markets, and finance, and to properly evaluate and mitigate environmental risks. Many small businesses struggle also more than large enterprises to get the finance they need for investments promoting sustainable practices. Therefore, aiming to unleash the power of Europe's SMEs to lead the twin transition to sustainability and digitization, the European Commission adopted a new SME strategy on 10th of March this year. It covers all types of Europe's 25 million SMEs, ranging from innovative startups to the traditional bakery, and proposes actions under 3 different pillars: capacity building, reducing regulatory burden, and improving access to finance. The crisis has actually made the strategy more relevant than ever. It will be a key tool for post-crisis recovery of the European economy, which will reflect Europe's commitments to the SDGs, and thus be green and social, and exploit the opportunities of digitalization in the best possible way. we have the flexibility to adjust key actions and adapt them to the new reality where necessary. And we really see our SMEs as potential world leaders in sustainability. And to ensure that our actions correspond to their needs, we constantly engage with SMEs as well as national and regional local authorities. And we have received very valuable input from all the stakeholders. So this is really just a start, and we recognize that we need to move together with other global actors. This is why I'm really so pleased to see the involvement of the ICSB, of Untitled, the UN, and here's a permanent mission of Argentina to the UN. Let us work together to turn these awful days into a new beginning for all of us around the world. We talk about a new normal of the crisis. As we move out, hopefully these days, I hope that the new normal will not be about face masks and social distancing, but about strong companies with environmental, social, and economic sustainability at the heart of their approach. Thank you very much for your attention.
The European Union, and of course we have a lot of opportunities to cooperate, particularly the areas that you mentioned, in the policy, regulatory development, and capacity building, access to finance, and so we look forward also to joint efforts in these areas going to the future. So with this, we go to our next speaker, which is Mr. Sajjad Malik, Director of Division of Resilience and Solutions, Unhcr. Mr. Malik, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. It is with great pleasure that I'm participating in this virtual panel discussion to celebrate Micro, Small, and Medium-Sized Enterprise Day. I want to emphasize the critical role played by the entrepreneurships and MSMEs in enabling refugees to become self-reliant, take care of themselves and their families, avoid dependencies, negative coping mechanisms, and meaningfully contribute to the communities that so generously host them. Supporting refugees' economies in economic inclusion is especially important given that an unprecedented nearly 80 million are now forcibly displaced. This figure has doubled in the past 10 years and now affects more than 1% of humanity. About 39% of refugees are aged between 18 and 49 and can contribute to the societies that host them if given the opportunity to do so. A Unhcr survey in 2019 revealed that 70% of refugees live in countries with restricted right to work, 47% in countries with restricted access to bank accounts, and 52% in countries with restricted right to own a business. Despite the challenges and relatively limited number of countries where refugees can work, we have witnessed significant progress over the past few years, particularly since the adoption of the New York Declaration and the Global Compact on Refugees. Policies on access to work have been adopted in Jordan, Ethiopia, and Djibouti, to name a few countries. Partnerships to support refugee entrepreneurships have been developed and supported with policy guidance, including the Policy Guide on Entrepreneurship, published together with UNCTAD and IOM. Using this guide, multi-stakeholder forums in 16 countries have provided the opportunities to bring together the private sector, government, UN agencies, NGOs, and refugees to design context-specific plans to facilitate refugee entrepreneurship. Access to affordable financial services such as bank accounts, mobile money, loans, and credit has also broadened. These gains are unfortunately threatened by the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on jobs and incomes of workers and their families, with many of the most vulnerable owning or working in MSMEs. COVID-19 has also had disproportionate socioeconomic impacts on refugees. 85% who live in developing context, and many of whom rely on informal or unprotected unprotected work characterized by low wages and lack of social protection. Many refugees have seen the business they run or work for, often MSMEs, forced to close. As a result, many are unable to meet their basic needs, unable to pay rents, the threat of evictions, and the use of negative coping mechanism. Millions of refugees have asked for urgent financial assistance to cover their daily basic needs. Despite these dire situations, we have also been encouraged by emerging good practices. Unhcr has been working alongside partners to enhance inclusion and access of refugees to entrepreneurship opportunities and related services and programs. During these past months, we have seen firsthand that refugees, IDPs, asylum seekers, and stateless people have stepped up and contributed to local economies, labor forces, and the frontline healthcare response. We have seen refugees entrepreneurs using their skills to produce masks, PPEs, and other sanitary equipment for their communities. They showed they want and must be part of the solution. Let me end with some key ingredients that can make MSMEs more meaningful for refugees as well. 1. Policymakers have a key role in creating an enabling environment that allow refugees with access to formalized entrepreneurship opportunities through the provision of relevant rights. The inclusion of refugees in national development plans and social protection schemes such as social safety nets and fiscal stimulus packages. The inclusion of refugees in studies measuring the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 can also inform appropriate targeting and response. Unhcr is working very closely with the World Bank, a Unhcr World Bank Joint Data Center, and many other partners on this. 2. The private sector, including MSMEs, can provide refugees with entrepreneurship training, leverage innovative technologies, and engage in public-private partnerships to support advocacy for refugee inclusion in relevant services and programs. To give you one example, in Rwanda, the African Entrepreneurship Collective, in partnership with Unhcr and the MasterCard Foundation, will be giving cash grants to more than 3,500 MSMEs, 60% of which will be refugee-owned, to relaunch or rebuild their businesses impacted by COVID-19. 3. Financial institutions can unleash refugee entrepreneurship's potential and provide much-needed access to markets, financial services, including through adaptations such as digital disbursements and allowing for flexible repayments. 4. Humanitarian agencies can also support refugee entrepreneurships through emergency cash where needed and advocate for refugees' inclusion in longer-term support structures, including business and recovery mechanisms. To close, the importance of the engagement of international community and multi-stakeholders in including refugees in their response cannot be underestimated. The COVID-19 crisis presents us with an opportunity to reimagine economic inclusion for the benefit of all while advancing our central commitment to the Agenda 2030, to leave no one behind, including refugees and the forcibly displaced. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malik, for your insightful contribution to the role of entrepreneurship and addressing issues of migration. And on this occasion, I would really like to thank you as well as IOM on this cooperation that we have on development of the policy guide on entrepreneurship and migration and its implementation in some of the countries. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we now move to our next speaker, Mr. Eduardo Diogo, Director of SEBRAE, SME Agency in Brazil. Mr. Diogo, you have the floor, please, the screen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I express my gratitude and appreciation to each one of you who is responsible for having SEBRAE here today in such a relevant and auspicious meeting that celebrates not only the SME Day, but also the ingenuity of all entrepreneurs who never whatsoever give up. To the United Nations, specifically to UNCTAD, so I refer to the Head of Enterprise Branch, Division, Investment and Enterprise, Mrs. Tatiana Krylova. It is a pleasure also to encounter my friend, Dr. Ayman El-Tarabash here. We are all living in a world that loses job positions by the millions every week. So the vital role of entrepreneurship can be better understood by each and every one of us every single day. Explorers who grasp that not to change equals slow death. Trailblazers who have the willingness to, and I paraphrase, trade cold comfort for change and so exchange a leading role in a cage for a walk on part in the war. The war of surviving, and I'm talking broadly, will always be a work in progress. And it demands many outstanding traits, among them self-reliance, resourcefulness, introspection, eagerness, fellowship, resilience, and awareness. Although I'm not as extreme as Galileo Galilei, who proclaimed that we cannot teach people anything, we can only help them discover it within themselves, I do recognize that some skills cannot be taught. They can, in fact, only be learned. That said, I do believe that we must find a way to disseminate those key strengths. I believe that is our generational obligation to embrace long-term thinking as a cornerstone to solve puzzles that couldn't be solved so far. It is not difficult to acknowledge that we can do better, and that although we have been doing a lot, it might not have been enough. It is certainly possible, as Albert Einstein proclaimed, and I quote, "Once we accept our limits, we go beyond them." Therefore, by accepting our limits and remaining grounded in reality always, we have a change to instill a sense of urgency, a sense of purpose, and a sense of community in everything we do. Regarding Brazil itself, and we have been attempting to work towards these goals I mentioned, Brazil is a country of entrepreneurs, infopreneurs, leaderpreneurs, allpreneurs, whateverpreneurs, with creativity to juggle and to dribble the day-to-day challenges, specifically during this savage traverse spawned by COVID-19. Brazil does have a high level of entrepreneurial activity. And now, probably more than ever in our lifetime, it has necessarily to be tempered with complementary entrepreneurial chops. As I declared, we are working towards this goal. Sebrae has barely 40,000 people working in its ecosystem to serve 17 million entrepreneurs. Via them, we are confident that we are contributing to the nation as a whole, that is, our 210 million inhabitants. So we are focusing the intellectual and comportamental inclusion of our target audience, I mean the 17 million. And we are also initiating a comprehensive program that will foster new, inspirational, and transformational leaders for the country. I mean regenerative leaders. As I named in the occasion I presented my capstone project at Georgetown University, we are craving for regenerative leaders. Concerning our target audience, if in the past the main goal was inclusion, and Brazil successfully fulfilled this task, nowadays our mission is to increase productivity. As our Deputy Minister of Economy, Carlos da Costa, frequently states, if SMEs productivity grows to a level parallel to most OECD countries, the Brazilian economy will benefit amazingly from it, since our GDP could be boosted by a 4% growth annually. In this context, as we can realize, SMEs productivity rhymes with our nation's prosperity. And to conclude, two last observations. First of all, I speak to Brazilian entrepreneurs. We are aware of your struggle. The time is profoundly challenging. We are also certain that you are able to pull off ambitious turnaround plans against the odds, because at the end of the day, you run the show. Don't give up on yourselves. Sebrae will never give up on you. And secondly, and to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to state that I come from a coast city, and the ocean teaches us some interesting lessons. Maybe the greatest of all, it is to be humble, or at least to try to be humble. That's a constant pursuit. After all, the ocean is only unfathomable as it is because it sets itself below the rivers in order to receive their blessed waters. And we are here today, embedded with this similar humility, to learn from you all, to celebrate the SMEs Day, and to honor the inventiveness of the heroes and the heroines who put on the line their own assets to create new jobs, to strengthen the economy, and to deliver positive aggregate value to society as a whole, for what we are deeply grateful. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Diogo, for your inspirational speech, and also for this long-term cooperation that we have with Sebrae on Emprotech promotion in the country, but also in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. With this, I would really like to hand over to the moderation of the session to my colleague Chantaline. Chantaline, please, you have the screen.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Good morning for those on this side of the hemisphere, and good afternoon for everyone else. It's such a pleasure to be with you this morning. And because we're a little tight on time, I won't make any more comment except to say that I'm very excited. I'm so happy that we're all together on this. So our next speaker is Ms. Lamia Kamal Chawi, and she's director of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, MSMEs, Region and Cities. And please, can we put the video?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are celebrating this MSME Day at a very somber moment. COVID-19 has brought the most severe recession in almost a century. The coronavirus crisis has caused enormous damage to people's health and well-being, affecting millions of jobs and firms. Small and medium-sized enterprises, which depending on the country represent between 60 to 80% of total employment, have been at the epicenter of the crisis. They have suffered disproportionately, accounting for 75% of all jobs in the most affected sector. We must pay tribute to the many courageous entrepreneurs and small business owners who have demonstrated remarkable agility, in some cases completely changing their business model overnight. Unfortunately, many others could not keep up. A huge number of small firms have gone out of business, and the sad reality is that we should expect many more to come. Across the OECD and beyond, the responses from governments to support their small businesses have been both swift and unprecedented, and on a much larger scale than in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. The OECD has been documenting the impact of COVID-19 on small firms from the start of the crisis. Since early March, the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities, has been mapping SME policy responses from across 60 countries. Most of the measures documented address the liquidity crisis. And this was the right approach to save as many SMEs and jobs as possible. But as lockdown measures are being lifted and countries prepare for recovery, the big question is, what's next for SMEs? The challenges ahead are tremendous, so we will need to think outside of the proverbial box. In terms of financing, for instance, we know that there are limits to how much money government extraordinary policies are needed to walk the tightrope towards recovery. We should count on our SMEs, which have always proved to be critical, innovative players. They are a big part of the solution, doing the right things today, can help SMEs transition toward an inclusive and sustainable recovery, a necessary path to preserve our economies and the foundations of our democracies. At the OECD, we are engaged and committed to helping governments in their efforts to help their SMEs rebound. And we are doing that in cooperation with a wide range of partners, including the ICSB. I wish all small businesses and entrepreneurs around the world a healthy, safe, and prosperous recovery for this MSME Day.
Thank you so much. This was a great video. And as Ms. Kamal Chawi mentioned so aptly, we do need to skill upgrading and help our MSMEs transition towards digital, the digital economy, which has only been sped up following this COVID-19. And this is something that UNTAD is working with our e-trade, our e-readiness assessment to help MSMEs in developing countries be able to take advantage of e-commerce and the digital space. I would now like to give the floor to Mr. David Luke, is coordinator of the African Trade Policy Center at the ECA, the Economic Commission for Africa, another partner with whom we work closely. David, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone. Let me begin by extending best wishes on this MSME Day. Of course, we at the Economic Commission for Africa, we're delighted to participate in this event. Since the beginning of the COVID crisis, we have been very active in terms of strategizing early with African ministers of finance on how best to respond to the crisis. Also in terms of assessing the unforeseen macroeconomic impacts, in terms also of assessing debt management strategies, and also even coming up with recommendations to support the exit from lockdown strategies. But what I want to share with you today is some work that we did specifically on MSMEs, where we undertook a survey in April 2020, April this year, to assess how the crisis was impacting African MSMEs. And this survey was done online. We had 337 respondents from across the continent. And I'll just give you a quick breakdown of the respondents. About 36% represented micro enterprises defined in terms of employees, defined in terms of enterprises with employees of 1 and 10 people. 28% representing small sized enterprises defined in terms of 11 to 50 employees. 20% representing medium-sized enterprises defined in terms of 51 to 250 employees, and 16% representing large-sized enterprises defined in terms of enterprises with over 250 employees. About 64% of the sample were concerned with enterprises dealing with services, and 36% concerned with enterprises dealing with goods. The result of this survey we have published in a report which is titled Insights on African Businesses' Reactions and Outlook to COVID-19. It's available on the ECA website. Let me now just highlight a few messages from the survey. Firstly, as you would expect, the survey confirmed that African businesses were being severely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, with over 80% of the companies surveyed affirming that it had a direct impact on their turnover, and even the smallest firms suggesting that they have been hit the hardest. The survey also affirmed issues relating to difficulties with the lack of operational cash flow, difficulties in demand and disruption in supply chains, which were forcing companies either to close down or to reduce their businesses significantly. And of course, this impacted workers in terms of layoffs, furloughs, working remotely, and so on. It impacted trade in terms of businesses that relied on overseas suppliers and overseas markets, expressing challenges in accessing supplies or in accessing demand or in responding to demand from these markets. We noted that there were greater difficulties faced by manufacturing than service industries whose production is more fragmented and more affected by physical barriers arising from the pandemic. Also, the survey suggested that African supply chains, where they're readily available, were somewhat underutilized. And this, of course, points to opportunities for boosting intra-African trade, particularly in the context of the ongoing African Continental Free Trade Area reform. On the positive side, the survey also showed that businesses in general seem to be reacting proactively by adopting new technologies, in particular the possibility to conduct business remotely where this was possible, in relation to online selling and shift to new products related to COVID-19, such as the production of face masks and sanitizers, personal protective equipment, and so on, and a new service and product lines that some companies adapted to and diversified into. Particularly as concerns digital trade, what this tells us is that digital trade and e-commerce clearly offers opportunities to us in this crisis, and certainly can gain in importance moving forward beyond the crisis. And as a result, TCA is recommending that the African Continental Free Trade Area process looks into this and front loads some understanding, some sort of agreement on common approaches to e-commerce. As I move towards the end of this intervention, let me also mention that Mauritius was one of the countries that we had a very strong response from in the survey. And so we analyzed the results from Mauritius separately. And this is also available as a report on our website. Now, we're 3 months into the pandemic. As I said at the beginning, this survey was conducted in April. 3 months later, we're now thinking of doing another survey, one which would help to shed light on the policy responses so far and understand how businesses are progressing during the pandemic. So we are currently administering a second round of the survey. At the end of this intervention, I'll share the survey questionnaire with the organizers because we do feel that the African participants in this event and their networks there's still scope for them to participate in this survey. The survey will run up till the end of this week, the 28th of June. And so we'll greatly value as many SME operators to be part of this survey. Finally, let me also, in closing, let me also just mention that ECA, through its sub-regional office for Southern Africa, is participating in the global initiative towards post-COVID-19 resurgence in the MSME sector, in partnership with Unhcr, DESA, and other regional commissions. I believe this was mentioned by Tatiova Kailova at the beginning. And we are hoping that this involvement would assist us in terms of the technical assistance that we can provide to our member states. So let me stop here. And once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this meeting. And I trust that some of these pointers and results that I've shared from the survey in terms of how African MSMEs have been impacted would find resonance in other experiences from other parts of the world. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm sure it will. And please do share the information of the survey so we can share with everyone, because there are many MSMEs from Africa on this call. And I would like to mention at this point, somebody had put in the chat box that we should acknowledge Arnad Kakraborty, sorry for my mispronunciation, who is the National Director of Emprotech India. And apparently he's doing a great job in reaching out to entrepreneurs in India. And therefore just wanted to make sure we take the 2 seconds to acknowledge him. Moving right along, because we're running out of time, as I said before, so it's my delight to introduce Mr. Steve Distente, President, Entrepreneurship Organization of New York, another partner of ours in this recognition and support for MSMEs. Steve, you have the screen.
Thank you so much, Chanteline. I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I'm also a documentary filmmaker. And I would love to thank the United Nations for the creation of the SDGs, because that has been a guiding light for many of us as entrepreneurs for many years. And our purpose-driven businesses would be rudderless if we didn't have the guidance of the UN's issues and concerns around the world. So with that said, my name is Steve Distente. I'm going to be posting a couple of things in the chat box and showing you what we're doing as entrepreneurs, feet on the ground here in the US and around the world. My role with EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, is to educate, inspire, and celebrate entrepreneurs that are using their businesses to solve world challenges. It's an exciting endeavor. So let's just jump right into it. The pandemic came and our worlds had changed. We went from thriving to surviving. For many of us, our businesses were shut down overnight. The pandemic provided us with an opportunity. Entrepreneurs reposition themselves quickly. And I created a podcast around it called Pivot or Perish. Pivot or Perish are stories of entrepreneurs who have changed their business models, the government assistance. What are we seeing as far as our businesses, and how can we help our fellow entrepreneurs? Defer, defer, defer. We deferred as many payments as possible. We tapped into our lines of credit because in 2008, 2009, the banks cut off our lines of credit. So we were at the front lines of recovery, crisis. We were there looking at this going, wow, what can we do? We focused on the PPP in the US, the payroll protection program, to keep people employed, because that's what we do. We give people confidence that we're going to make it through this, and the PPP helped do that. God bless the SBA, who gave us 6 months of payments on some of our loans. It was wonderful. But most important was the psychology of an entrepreneur. How do we think? And what ended up happening were there were some heroes that popped up throughout this. And who do you want to be a hero to was a question we kept asking. We have John Cacciatore, who is an entrepreneur with a body shop, who realized he couldn't really do this work inside his shop, and he actually created a methodology of fogging vehicles. And what did he do? Instead of making money with it right away, he went to the hospitals, and for free, he cleaned the hospital workers' cars. What a beautiful story. Rich DeBeal, the owner and founder of Long Island Spirits and Long Island Vodka, found out that the World Health Organization had made a formulation for hand sanitizer. So suddenly his vodka turned into hand sanitizer, and he was serving us where we couldn't get hand sanitizer. Wonderful ways of being able to give them business. They were operating 24 hours. John's Crazy Socks, a group of cool entrepreneurs started by a gentleman who's got a differing ability. He has Down syndrome, John Cronin. And they are now making face masks. Absolutely amazing. But here's the most remarkable story, is Lisa Marie George, who cared for hundreds of children at the Ann Brower School and instantly she was put out of business. But rather than close her doors entirely, she offered childcare to children of healthcare workers at no cost. Didn't get reimbursed, at no cost. Those are the beautiful stories of heroes who are entrepreneurs. And most recently, with the horrible incidents of George Floyd, with the racial inequalities, we once again turn to the SDGs. And as the SDGs, they gave us guidance through SDG 10, reduced inequalities, which you'll see right back here. We were able to focus our organizations in order to be able to be part of the solution to reduce inequalities in income, as well as those based upon age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic status within a country. And last but not least, I learned there is an international day for the elimination of racism. The UN thought of it again, and it was wonderful. March 21st is the day we celebrate that, and I would love to be part of that celebration. I am so grateful for the recognition of entrepreneurs to be part of the solution for the SDGs, for the next decade of goals, but for the pandemic especially, where we were able to step up, speak up, and be part of the solution. For that, I am so grateful, and thank you so much, Chantaline, for having me today on this panel.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I couldn't agree more. And it goes back to what Lumia had said in her speech, right? We have the instrument, they exist. We need just to gather together and put them out there. One thing I would add is payment on invoice instead of payment on 30 or 60 days. That would go a long way to help our SMEs, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yes, please work with us, find us.
Thank you. We will, Steve. Moving right along, and Tatiana, my colleague, mentioned our Protect and Entrepreneurship for Policy Framework, but we also have other entrepreneurship programs at UNCTAD that are great. And so the next two speakers are participating in two of these initiatives. So the first one, Ms. Nazanin Daneshvar, who is the CEO and founder of TAFIFAN of Iran, is one of our E-Trade for Women advocate. And I can't wait to hear her because they're doing some wonderful work. So Nazanin, you have the floor.
So thank you very much. That's an honor to be part of this program. And well, I mean, I've been listening to all these wonderful talks about basically MSMEs and how to support them. I mean, we've been talking about the digital world and digitalization for quite a while, but one thing that I think came as a big hit to all of us is like we never thought about where these MSMEs are actually located in the digital world. So when the pandemic happened, pretty much I was reading the news, I mean, from Iran to all over the world, pretty much all the countries were kind of shocked. Okay, what about these offline businesses? And on the other side, we've been talking about the O2O trend, or offline to online or online to offline for years. But the reality is we didn't really spend that much of a time or looking into it, how we are executing this online to offline trend. So bringing the offline businesses online and taking the online customers offline. I mean, just some numbers, like right now, the penetration rate of the internet all over the world is nearly 60%. But in reality, just 14% of the retail market is just happening online. And if you take the big companies aside from this number, I'm sure the percentage for the small businesses is pretty small. So that is kind of a shocking number. So it means the offline businesses are not online and they cannot survive it. And obviously, the governments cannot support them more. I mean, the financing is not a solution, as we discussed. You know, it's just a debt. But we have to be ready for taking the offline businesses to the online trends to create more startups that are actually focused on the offline businesses. I mean, in TAFIFAN, we are basically, what TAFIFAN is actually a discount portal for offline businesses. So we take them online, we make an online presence. And overnight, we saw 90% drop on their sales on every single corner of the country. So that already shows like what a disaster was coming. Like it was literally in 48 hours. So one thing that actually the government took the initiative they started crediting those businesses through us because we knew how much each business is working, how big they are, the revenue is, how many employees they have, etc. So that was one of the good initiatives, and we had the flexibility to actually start financing them so quickly and giving them the money to go back to their business or start, like, at least survive through it. But on the other side, as I said, the O2O trend is a very important thing, which there are so many initiatives that the governments and the policymakers, to be honest, they have missed the train to look into it. And I think we are really at a very difficult time. If you look at China, they have a company called Meituan Dianping. It's a very massive company, and they have successfully implemented the idea of O2O years back. Indonesia, the minister was one of the successful countries to having so many unicorns in the O2O market. But when we look at, like, basically Middle East, and the West, O2O is not still a trend. So basically, what I'm hoping is, like, this pandemic would be really a big lesson for us, and start getting and focusing, first of all, knowing the importance of the startups, the online businesses. And I think, at least in my country, that was one of the very important points, that it just came through the eyes of the government, how supporting the startups is important. And on the other side, I think, and the other, basically the rest of the world is creating these questions, how a bakery should be online. The bakery never thought about it. They don't have the money to invest in it. They don't have the initiative. They don't have the resources. So we need the infrastructure, and we need the startups that could actually make that path clear. And that comes with the help of entrepreneurs as well as policymakers and the financing and etc. Like everything to have a proper, basically, ecosystem. So yeah, I think that is at least the lesson that I've taken, and we are taking very serious routes towards that.
Thank you so much. And indeed, this offline to online is very important. And this is something that we've identified. And as you know, there is an initiative at the UN to try to go from 50% of connection to 100% connection. Because with the acceleration of the digitalization of the economy, if we don't achieve that, developing country will not be able, and small medium enterprise won't be able. But thank you for all the work that you do in Iran. And now I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, because she's doing also bringing companies online and helping them in Africa. And so let me introduce Ms. Uju Uzo Ojinaka. She is the CEO of Traders of Africa, and she is one of our e-founder from the e-founder initiative graduate. Uju, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much, Chantaline, and the United Nations, all of you, for putting together this awesome event and for having me. It's really a great privilege. MSME event, because I am one. I run Traders of Africa, which is a Pan-African online marketplace for products grown, produced, or manufactured in Africa only. We are strictly a point of convergence. We've been called the Alibaba for Africa. We cannot overemphasize the impact of COVID-19 on MSMEs, especially the Africans. Okay, let me just give you a typical example. You know, when we listen to policymakers talk about how the MSME have helped the economy, to a typical entrepreneur, they just want to survive. So they're not looking at what the impact of what they are doing has to do with the economy. What is most important to all of us is that our business survives, because most of us are job creators. We have young people working with us. Most of the SDGs that the United Nations is all about, that's what we are all propagating. But then the most important thing for all of us is to survive. So you can imagine what has happened with this pandemic. A lot of companies have gone under. They can't come up. I mean, I appreciate, and we all appreciate, that through the United Nations and the various agencies, they've actually pushed a lot of African governments to do one or two things for for various entrepreneurs, to build up their businesses and all that. But beyond money, beyond just giving us money, there are a lot of people who have actually lost hope. I mean, where do you start? If you're dealing on perishables during the lockdown, your products are all perished. So what's the motivation to continue to do what you're doing? For us at Traders of Africa, even though we're just a point of convergence, there are great disruptions on the supply chain right now. And I do agree with Steve that just spoke. A lot of us would prefer to pay on invoice rather than various credits, because a lot of companies are defaulting on their credits. They default and they take a lot more time before they pay. So all these things are being very, they kind of make most of the entrepreneurs not to want to continue the business. But we all know, it's so cliche to say that the MSMEs are the bane of the economy because we create the most job, we're the most agile. So for the company, for the economy to even grow out of this pandemic, we need us. So beyond just giving us just money, we need, the Untitled and the Alibaba group is doing exceptionally well with the eFounders Fellowship. And you take a few people and you train us on what we expect and what we need to do. But then we need to find a way to trickle this down, bring it down to more people, let more entrepreneurs have access to some of this mentorship that I've gotten. So how will I be able to impact this more to the people in my locality so that they be able to move on? The last speaker that spoke about, how the digital economy needs to come up. How do you do digital economy without internet? A whole lot of these companies cannot afford this. So when you talk about digital economy, yes, we want all our businesses to be online, but how do we make it happen? Can we even pay for it? Can our customers even pay for those products? Can they even know that those products are online? How can you be online when your customers are offline? So we have to find a way, because these are the things that will make it easy for this, for a whole lot of us to continue to do the business that we do and continue to excel. Because truthfully, what I have seen is that a lot of us are interested. We have the will to continue to work very hard, to move beyond this, to continue to, push the business and let this wave course through. But we need a few push here, a few incentive from different sources, anywhere. Okay, and that we can't all do it alone. We need to collaborate. So how do you ensure that even in the midst, the pandemic is saying people need to social distance, we need to do this, but we can't do that. We need to find a way in the midst of all this to continue to collaborate, because that's the only way growth will happen. If I can't collaborate with you in the US or in any other part of Africa, how can I grow just being in my locality? The growth will be stunted. So, I know that all of you in the United Nations are doing a lot of work in making policies, but we need to look at some of these things, because for people like us, we are blessed to be in the group that we are, to be able to have access to some of this mentorship, but there are a lot more people who need to have access to this. So how can we work with you? We now, this is not Alibaba and the United Untitled. How can Traders of Africa, Uju, and a few other people, eFounders in Nigeria, work with you directly to reach the people who we think need the next tier? How do we get them on board to be able to push? And also they will in turn be motivated to work with the next tier. I think if we continue to take it that way, people will know that, yes, it's going to be difficult, but somehow, if you keep putting in the time, success will be assured. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak.
Thank you so much, Uju, and I love your passion and your energy. And I believe that with the group of people on this WebEx, we have the opportunity to scale up and reach more people like you that can make a difference in their own countries. And it's a call to everybody. That's the goal of today. Thank you, Uju. With this, I'm concluding in a very high note this panel. I'm so sorry for the people that have put Q&As. Don't worry, we will, first of all, we will include that, the agencies individually on this as partners, but also jointly look at how we can address your Q&As and include the suggestion that you're making. And we also invite you to work with us. Our colleague David mentioned that the Regional Commission, UNCTAD, DESA, and others, we're in response to socioeconomic follow-up to the COVID-19. We are creating two major responses to help MSMEs, and we will invite you to, I invite my colleague to put the information on the chat. And without further ado, I want to thank Argentina, the mission of Argentina to the UN, ICSB, DESA, UNIDO, all panelists and participants. And I'm delighted to pass on the floor to my colleague, Anson Sibanda, who is Chief National Strategy and Capacity Building Branch in the Division for Sustainable Development Goals at DESA, one of our partners, who will be chairing the next session. Anson, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Chantal and Tatiana, for that very engaging panel discussion. And now I'd like to welcome you to this second panel discussion on adding chairs. All voices welcome at this table. As we have heard from the previous speakers, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a sharp economic slowdown in all sectors, with severe impacts on MSMEs. Of greater concern is the fact that MSMEs in developing countries are concentrated in sectors which are highly susceptible to the negative impacts of the COVID-19 outbreak. It is therefore good to hear that national governments all over the world have created stimulus packages to support MSMEs. Going forward, more sustained policy support would be needed to strengthen resilience of MSMEs in the recovery and rebuilding phases. We can only reimagine social and economic inclusion if we commit ourselves to adding chairs and welcoming all voices at the table. Such an inclusive approach would ensure that policy support and critical resources reach both formal and informal MSMEs, and that no one is left behind in the economic resurgence after COVID-19 outbreak. At this time of crisis, MSMEs as enduring institutions for entrepreneurship should not be ignored. MSMEs have already demonstrated their capacity of keeping the momentum of job creation in the face of the pandemic through localized supply chains, support of niche markets, and diversified business model. The exemplary work of SMEs would show them to be the first responder for rebuilding the world anew. SMEs need to be supported to bounce back better and improve their capacities to achieve the sustainable development goals. With those few words, we have our first video message from our speaker, Ms. Blesila Latayona, who is the Undersecretary in the Department of Trade and Industry, the Philippines.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the United Nations. It's an honor to join you today in this virtual event leading up to our celebration of the MSME Day. We talk about our MSMEs being the lifeblood of the economy, and now that we are facing a once-in-a-century crisis, the health of both our people and our economy are in a dire situation. While we're seeing people getting sick and hospitalized, we are also seeing businesses downsizing or closing altogether. In the case of the Philippines, when community quarantines were imposed, around 26% of the MSMEs ceased operations, 52% went on partial operations, and only 22% remained in full operations. Thus, in March of 2020, the government acted fast to craft and approve a law to address the urgent need for swift and efficient measures to minimize the effects of the pandemic. To keep the businesses afloat while on lockdown, a moratorium on the payment of residential and commercial rents falling within the period of enhanced community quarantine was imposed without incurring interest, penalties, fees, and other charges. A 1 billion pesos enterprise rehabilitation financing facility was made available through the Small Business Corporation, which is an attached agency of the Department of Trade and Industry, and this is to support the financing requirements of the micro and small businesses affected by the economic impact of COVID-19. Existing borrowers under the Small Business Corporation's microfinancing program were also given moratorium in the repayment of existing loans. Our Department of Agriculture provides a survival and recovery program for small farmers and fisher folks affected by community quarantine with 0% interest loan assistance so as to help ensure the availability of food supply. The Department of Trade and Industry now focuses on retooling and reskilling entrepreneurs who have been forced to close their businesses due to the pandemic. For this, we have a livelihood seeding program that provides online training as well as livelihood starter kits for micro enterprises. The national government is also providing a wage subsidy for affected employees of small businesses to help mitigate the impact of quarantine so that affected small businesses can retain their employees during the quarantine period. We also have a shared services facility project, fabrication laboratories, where we provide MSMEs with free machines and equipment to improve their competitiveness. And I am happy to share that our Fab Labs are now producing personal protective equipments or PPEs, ethyl alcohol, face shields, and aerosol boxes using digital fabrication machines such as the 3D printers, laser cutters, and others. SSFs, on the other hand, are producing face masks and face shields. Production of such items is being made to address the supply gap that the Philippines, like most countries, is experiencing at this time. At this time when people are forced to stay at home, we need to offer alternative modes of buying and selling basic needs and other necessities. Thus, we help MSMEs transform their business digitally. For this, we offer a series of free webinars where enablers across the entire e-commerce ecosystem provide their expertise and experiences on how to take advantage of the digital space. As nations relax quarantine measures, business will have to start opening up again and gain the opportunity to recover. It is going to be hard. For the brief period that they have temporarily ceased operations, they will have to return to the unpaid bills, wages, and other operating expenses. On top of that, consumers remain cautious while COVID-19 lurks. While we do recognize the grit and resilience of our entrepreneurs, they will need every single bit of available support. But as mentioned, in the Philippines, we are dealing with COVID-19 through the bayanihan spirit, or a sense of communal heroism that calls upon every member of the society to do their part in carrying the weight brought about by this pandemic. Our government sets the policy to provide all the programs earlier described. Businesses, big and small, are contributing to the recovery efforts by repositioning their enterprises to stay relevant through leveraging digital business solutions and innovating business models. NGOs continue to lend a hand in making sure marginalized sectors of society are receiving the support they need. The academe helps provide the brains, so to speak, behind the major decisions we're undertaking at a time of utter uncertainty. This whole of society approach through the bayanihan model is something that we wish to share with everyone in the United Nations. In difficult times such as this, every single one of us is called to be a hero, to move forward, and to heal as one. Thank you, and I wish you all a fruitful day ahead.
Thanks a lot. Those were very inspiring words from Ms. Latayona, I think the issues of repositioning business, innovation, supporting our marginalized social groups are very, very critical. The importance of retooling and reskilling of our entrepreneurs is very, very critical. Issues of wage subsidies, I think these are very, very important issues. Our second speaker is Mr. Dragan Radic, who is the head of the Small and Medium Enterprises Unit at the ILO. Dragan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak to all of you today on these important days for micro and SMEs. And just to say a big hello to traditional partners, UNCTAD, ICSB, to DESA as well, and to Mission of Argentina. So basically, in my presentation, first, before I start, I'd quite like to say that I was very impressed because I've been listening for more than 1 hour and I've been in front of my PC for about 10 hours today. I was impressed really by energy and enthusiasm of some of the entrepreneurs that they spoke today. You know, it's always great to see the and to hear the entrepreneurs in the room. So this was fantastic. So just before I start, briefly to introduce the ILO for those who might not be aware, this is UN a specialized agency. We are known for our decent work agenda, and we are the custodian of SDG number 8. The SME unit that I lead is there to support the self-employed micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to start and to grow, but not in any way, but to grow sustainably and to create more and better jobs. So when it comes to numbers, you know, everybody talks about numbers, how SMEs are important, and you hear various quotes, and that is true. You know, when you look at the contribution to GDP between 40 and 60%, in terms of employment numbers, what we did in last year, we really wanted to look at, in particular, micro enterprises and self-employed, and we went beyond and wanted to look at also informal economy, because most of the research previously, it was struggling a little bit with this angle. So when we actually combined all this based on the data from almost 100 countries, we actually discovered that, you know, 70% of total employment is actually to be found in small economic units. I'm talking here about self-employed, micro and small. 70% of global employment just there, you know, and so they are very big in numbers collectively. But when you look at them individually, they are quite fragile, no? Because they struggle with productivity, with poor working conditions. I'm talking generally here, right? Poor management practices, problems with access to finance, access to skills, digitalization, and so on. And this is on a good day. But really, what happens when the day turns bad, like in the situation of COVID-19? So we conducted the global survey ourselves because we wanted to know what is going on. And we just didn't ask also what kind of problems the SMEs are facing, but also we wanted to know what we can do about that. So already then in April, you know, 70% of SMEs were just about to close down or to close, either temporary or permanent. Major problems with cash, you know, cash flow crisis everywhere, disruption of supply chains, disruption on a demand side, cancellation of orders. So it was all bad news. And then basically what we've also seen, massive job losses. The ILO has estimated the reduction of working hours globally over 10%, which is equivalent to about 300 million job losses only in the second quarter. But in all that bad news, there were some success stories emerging because at the end of the day, entrepreneurs are entrepreneurial, right? They find a way, and many did, how to actually turn this crisis into opportunities. And we can discuss some examples later on. And to make it even worse, then we have this informality challenge, which is not going away, right? Where the ILO figures tell us that 62% of the global workforce is engaged in informal economy. And then what we did just recently, we were worried about that, of course. So we looked at, in particular, the 7 sectors that are prone to COVID-19 closure. And then we looked at who is providing employment there, right? And then we were shocked to see that actually self-employed and micro firms provide a livelihood for over 800 million workers in those 7 sectors. And 80% out of that was actually in informal economy, which led us to conclude that small matters more than ever before. Why? Because we are not only talking now about health crisis and economic crisis, but here we are talking about huge humanitarian crisis if things are not fixed, right? So this is a mega challenge. If you look at, for example, just in Asia, the 260 million informal self-employed. These are not necessarily, visionary entrepreneurs. These are necessity entrepreneurs. So it is great, and it's very fair that we are recognizing today the importance of MSMEs globally. But we should also remember that these small businesses count for each and every day of the year. So the question is then, what needs to be done now in situation of COVID-19? How do we help small businesses? And I think we have to look at very briefly a couple of phases here. There are 3, right? So in the lockdown phase, what the government was doing, it was really good. It was to support number 1 priority of small business, and that was cash and liquidity. And that was done quite well. More developed countries provided more, less developed perhaps a bit less, but most countries took good care of that. In reactivation phase that we are now seeing in Europe, what's coming loud and clear, the priority number 1 for small business is how do I return to business safe? How do I keep my workers safe? So give me please the advice on this POSH COVID-19 return to business situation, and also about the business continuity and resilience, because this is unfortunately not going away. In Europe now, in some countries, we are seeing again, the COVID-19 is coming back big time. Then, of course, what we hear is access to finance, streamlined, simple, fair, with decent interest rates. It's important. And what is also very important is a proper and enabling business environment. It is the opportunity now to actually finally look at the business environment that is enabling rather than disabling for small businesses, right? And also then we talked, and I've heard a lot, the digitalization and importance of digital infrastructure and basic digital skills. But it's not only about that. I mean, in some countries, I've heard today I was on another panel, you have digital infrastructure, but it's going to cost you a bomb. It's going to cost you like 70% of your monthly income to buy 1 or 2 gig of data. I mean, well, that doesn't help, does it? So, and then finally, in recovery phase, we're talking about big ticket items such as economic and structural transformation that needs to happen, investments in physical and digital infrastructure in order to put cash in hands to people and boost economic demand. And overall, this should be seen, as somebody said, Churchill, and I didn't hear that, never waste a good crisis. I like that. So this is exactly that. It should be seen as the opportunity to create now better environment, more sustainable, greener, and fairer society. And I'm concluding here, what else needs to change? I think we need to change, right? Our agencies, we need to change as well, because we have to think about a different way of doing business. We should be entrepreneurial as well. And in the ILO, we've adjusted already. We are now going with digital offerings. We are tampering with the tools. We are creating different offerings to cater for demands of today. Also new partnerships within UN agencies, genuine partnerships where we want to see more collaboration and less competition in the field. Partnerships with private sector, with NGOs, these partnerships are now needed. And finally, when it comes to private sector development projects, what we've been seeing in the past, lots of projects, but at a smaller scale, operating sometimes in the same country. I think what we need, it's a bigger private sector development approach to projects that is more flexible, demand-driven, and more scalable in order to drive the change forward. So this is me. Thank you very much for the opportunity again on behalf of the ILO.
Thank you very much, Dragan, for raising some very important points. I think one key takeaway is we should focus as well on success stories. They've been able to turn this crisis into an opportunity. And I think we had a similar message in the previous session where so many businesses turned their enterprises to provide certain products that were critical during the COVID pandemic, like turning a whiskey factory into a factory that can produce sanitizers. And I think the three elements that you highlight, what needs to be done. Obviously, some countries are still in the lockdown phase and some are still trying to come out of it. But the reactivation phase where we are, I think is very, very important. And we need to make sure that workers can get back to their offices and factories safely. With that, our next speaker is Mr. Andrew Wilson, who is the permanent observer of the ICC to the United Nations. Andrew, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Emerson. Well, I'm gonna deviate from the remarks I was advised to give because I want to pick up on the three phases that the speaker from the ILO very eloquently set out. Because I think they're a really interesting reference point for understanding what needs to be done, both at national level and at global level, in terms of responding to what is very, very clearly, when you look at any of the economic data, any of the statistics around employment, the defining crisis or the defining element of the crisis when it comes to protecting livelihoods from the ravages of COVID-19. So to start with the notion of the emergency phase, and yes, we have seen some very, very impressive interventions from governments, developed and developing, to keep small businesses afloat during the crisis and to keep people employed. There's no doubt about that. The one concern I have is that there's a risk that the international debate is getting a little bit ahead of itself. So we're starting to talk about rebooting the economy and building back better, which is great, and the optimism is certainly welcome. But I think we have to prepare and have to recognize that this situation, the deep economic recession we're seeing, is going to be with us for a long time, is going to be unpredictable in terms of economic reopening and then closing of the economies, as we've seen in China, for instance, recently. And if you look at the most recent projections from the International Monetary Fund, their World Economic Outlook, published yesterday, you see a very uncertain economic environment, not just through this year, but actually moving into 2021. And to us, that calls for two things. In developed countries, governments need to be ready to throw out the fiscal rulebook and continue to provide fiscal stimulus where it's needed to protect SMEs. And to our mind, there is no moral hazard in this. This is an unprecedented crisis with SMEs inevitably underprepared for the artificial turning off of demand within the global economy. And even what we're seeing is even when economies reopen or stay open, in the case of Sweden, demand remains suppressed by fear of the virus. So there's going to be a need for continued stimulus. Then on the developing country front, the situation is much the same, if not more, even more so important. And to us, that speaks to the need for international cooperation to ensure that developing and least developed country governments have the fiscal capacity not only to protect their citizens against the virus, so public health measures, but also to intervene where they need to support SMEs, small businesses, and also displaced workers. And for us, that makes a very crystal clear business case, a very clear case from the real economy for greater international support, such as through the issuance of new SDRs from the IMF, and potentially, in cases of need, for a much broader package of sovereign debt relief to be agreed by the G20. And when I say broader, I mean both in terms of the countries covered compared to the agreement agreed by G20 finance ministers in April, but also broader in terms of the scope of the relief, the tenor of the relief, not just 6 months, but I think we're looking at ultimately 2 years based on the IMF projections and all of the data we've seen from our national chapters throughout the world. And let me just be clear to developed economies, if there are any in the audience today, there is a very clear domestic business case for doing that when you think of the imperative of unclogging supply chains, which have been badly affected in a number of sectors, but also the imperative of actually restoring a semblance of demand in markets that developed economies have come to rely relatively heavily on over the last 20 years. To move very quickly to the reboot phase, or the reopening of the economy phase, I think uncertainty reigns. And one thing I just wanted to point to is we have a global campaign called Save Our SMEs, SOS, as part of which we are providing a number of tools to businesses in terms of business continuity planning, but also in terms of return to work procedures, family-friendly policies, which we've developed in collaboration with UNICEF. And we will continue to do so. And if anyone in the audience today would like us to see ICC develop new products in other areas, we are very happy and very ready to respond to that demand. But ultimately, we will run through great uncertainty as the virus continues to spread. And on that note, and again, making a very clear business case from the real economy, from SMEs, there's an absolute imperative that we see sufficient international cooperation and sufficient finance from advanced economy governments to ensure that there is equitable access to COVID-19 tests, treatments, and ultimately, most importantly, in terms of resolving this crisis, a COVID-19 vaccine. And if we see what I would call a sicken thy neighbor approach towards access to a future vaccine, it is not just SMEs and businesses at large in developing economies that will suffer. It is business throughout the world. A country may be able to insulate its own citizens from the virus by way of a COVID-19 vaccine, but the economic effects, the global economic effects, and the local economic effects of the virus will continue to be felt by the domestic businesses if the virus continues to spread in markets that are important in providing supply, and most crucially, in markets that are very important in terms of export demand. So there is an absolute global imperative, and it's not just a moral case, it's a business case, and it is vitally important for SMEs in developed and developing economies alike, and governments absolutely have to heed that call and understand that there is an economic logic in global solidarity. Very quickly, in terms of the future Build Back Better or a resilient rebuild, I think we've heard many of the key points already. Clearly, digitization has a key role to play. And I think, certainly from our perspective, as we've walked through this crisis with businesses throughout our network, it's very clear that the pandemic has exposed severe fragilities in our economic system today. And I think we have to think of how do we build resilience? And clearly part of that is SME digitization. And if there are barriers, how do we address them in a meaningful way? If international cooperation and international assistance is needed, then how do we scale that up to the degree necessary? Just one element I want to touch on very quickly, because I think it's often missed in the discussion around digitization, is there's always a nexus between digitization and the real economy when it comes to merchandise trade. And I think in that regard, we have to pay particular attention coming out of the crisis to trade facilitation reforms. So how do you expedite safely and effectively the cross-border trade in international goods? And I think this is an area that requires absolute focus. We've seen issues already through the crisis in a number of areas. And I think coming out, if we want to achieve a resilient economy, it is absolutely imperative that trade facilitation is a cornerstone of that agenda, and any reforms implemented will ultimately have the greatest benefit for SMEs. So thank you very much on that. And again, thank you to all of the hosts of today's event.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for those interesting remarks. I think it's very important that yesterday we did get some very sobering news from the IMF that this is a crisis like no other, and the global economy is likely to grow at about 4.9%. And I think this will last for a long period of time, as you rightly say, and we need, I think, to think about that. And of course, it did bring out a very important issue, which is the importance of international cooperation. But we're also in an environment where there are significant threats to multilateralism, so we need to figure out a way around that and to make sure that countries can cooperate better. And you rightly point out that, yes, you might have a vaccine in your country, but if that vaccine does not become a global product that is shared by all, the economic effects of the virus will likely continue. So how do we build resilience better? I think it's important that we continue to close the digital divide between countries as well as within countries. With those remarks, I will now turn to Ms. Ivy Ipia, who is the owner of Tiwajo Limited in Ghana. Ms. Ivy, you have the floor. Do we have Ivy?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you can proceed.
Okay, okay. So, thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate the time and the knowledge I've learned and the hope I'm given to move on as an SME calling from Ghana. What this pandemic did to me personally as a woman in business was that it created a bit of fear. I mean, a lot of fear. The whole world was shaken by the pandemic. Personally, I was afraid in three major areas. I was afraid for my staff, how things would move with them. I was afraid for the export market, how it will go. And also, I was afraid about some of the importations we make in terms of our raw materials. We're getting some of them from outside Ghana, and when the borders were closed, I was scared of how we will overcome the challenges. Two things really helped us. The two are the fact that we are a team of biochemists trying to formulate other products. It helped us to formulate products like sanitizers, alcohol wraps, the companies that we are already working with. And also, there is a program called WACO in Ghana, run by EU and UNIDO. They trained us as SMEs to overcome challenges. And these meetings help us to look beyond the challenges that we can face in our business. And all these help us to plan ahead of such events. And in three ways, my staff, I was afraid of losing some of them due to the pandemic, but we were able to overcome that challenge. People and staff, provide them with the proper employees, and also help them come to work every day, even providing transportation in and out for them. Our export market was affected greatly, but the good news was that we were able to build a strong local team. We already had access to the local market, and we have to strengthen that one. And that really helped us to sustain the local market and also not rely too much on export. Because as a company, we had about 70% of our products being done locally, bought locally, and we had 30% of export. So the pandemic actually affected our export market, but kept us going on the local market. What we realized within the local market was that the fear of not our clients not buying our soap was not really what was happening in the market. what happened was that actually they were buying in bulk. From the shops that we're supplying to. So they had more of their, we had more sales during the pandemic. We expected. And with moving production, it really also boosts our revenue. And also, we have to also find some of our raw materials locally. And that actually helped us to know that, I mean, it's as SMEs, we also have to look internally to source most of our raw materials to keep us going. One thing I've realized over this pandemic, in the midst of it, I've realized that as SMEs have a new product developed on the shelf so that in case of any emergency, we can come up with them. All these were things that was a help from the program we went to, like the Wacom I'm talking about, the UNIDO program, which actually helped us because they put us into clusters to discuss our challenges. And it brought about a lot of challenges that were unforeseen, and it helped us to overcome such challenges. I think SMEs should be more digital as we are going into an era that we have to be more digital in order to be sustained. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ivy. Of course, the line is very difficult to find. Maybe you can mute yourself, because I can still see some echo. Thank you. Otherwise, it was an interesting perspective to hear from an MSME that has gone through the COVID experience, how it has affected you personally, as well as your customers and how you have tried to survive in terms of sourcing your raw materials and how you can come up with new products. And of course, you did touch on the importance of partnerships, how you've been supported by UNIDO and other partners to say how you can survive in this current environment. Our next speaker is Mr. Rene Van Beckel, who is the UNIDO representative in India. Mr. Rene, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, colleagues, good evening from Delhi. As outlined by our UNIDO DG in the earlier session, the work on inclusive and sustainable industrial development is strongly focused on MSMEs. So a vibrant MSME sector is necessary to achieve the SDGs. I'm based in India and I work for South Asia, so I would like to give a little bit of a perspective from the South Asian perspective. I would like to elaborate briefly on 4 points. First, and several speakers have already referred to that, MSMEs are the backbone from the economy, but are now also facing the brunt of the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown measures. Just as an example, in a survey that was conducted in India earlier this month, 46,000 MSMEs, it was found that 1 in 3 entrepreneurs considers their business beyond recovery. That would translate in a loss of 20 million MSMEs just in India, and this would upend the loss, the incomes and livelihoods of perhaps 100+ million entrepreneurs and workers. This, of course, is unique to India and the scale of India, but we see similar figures, 1 out of 3 MSMEs probably not surviving already right now. This might change if the pandemic and the lockdown measures continue. Secondly, I think that the most immediate and tangible impact has been the erosion of working capital. Yes, this in part reflects deeper line challenges, particularly the unprecedented uncertainty in markets and societies, the plummeted customer demand, order cancellations, reverse labor migration, decayed inventories and machinery, and of course also disrupted supply chains. So basically we saw, and that was referred to also earlier, the lockdown meant that business overnight, scenarios changed overnight. With the exception of a few critical sectors, sales dropped to close to zero for most of the enterprises. In the absence of sales income and with costs for labor, rent, loans, continuing businesses basically ate up their cash resources very quickly. So MSMEs require immediate cash to pay for essential inputs as raw materials, energy, labor to restart business. However, this only makes sense when there's a real prospect of sales. To sell, which requires then the emergence of market demand across business to consumer, business to business, and business to government sectors. So we can say that market demand is, in a sense, the only engine for economic recovery. Cash flow is the starter, and emergency financing can only be the ignition for it. Thirdly, I would say that the pandemic laid bare or was exaggerated by structural weaknesses across the MSME segment, which firstly then aggravated the impacts of the pandemic on the businesses, but now also impede the ability to recover, possibly build back better. And in that regard, I can report on the work that UNIDO here in India has been doing with partners to fast-track the development and launch of an online knowledge platform, Building Business Back from Crisis, B3C, MSME.org, which provides guidance to MSMEs to restart, recover, and revitalize business. This provides a roadmap to provide a pathway to recovery. So businesses first have to plan for recovery, which business activities still make sense and which should probably be postponed. And secondly, we need to ready the workplace. Several people have already said we need to make the workplace safe from a COVID perspective for infection control. But what happened to the equipment that was standing there idle and might have degraded? If we start up, we have seen accidents happening left, right, and center. And then the third phase is to restart for recovery, which is basically more the debottlenecking of all the challenges which we have in operations, manpower, supply, sales, to re-establish a baseline for business. And fourth, we can look at reviving for growth. So looking at business core competencies, like we were just hearing from Ghana, we have a business competency on textile manufacture, so we can go into PPEs or other areas. So that's the revive for growth. And then the fifth area is really looking at more future-proofing our business. And that has been highlighted also with the business continuity planning and so on. But we should also look at crisis as an opportunity to improve. So there were structural weaknesses in the MSME segment. So how can we look now at rebuilding better and focusing on some aspects which were weak? So entrepreneurship, financing, operations, occupational health and safety. So these are addressed. And can we in the rebuilding exercise really do this? We can say, some might say, let's overlook the environment issue or the energy issue, but this is really issues where businesses are safe. So we should do this environment, we should do waste reduction, we should do occupational health and safety right now in a way to strengthen our business. As a fourth point, I would like to mention that perhaps everybody is seeing that the present is already much different from what we saw pre-COVID. And many digital solutions have really emerged. I think I would like to emphasize 2 points. That if we move perhaps to a global value chain, rebooted value chain 0.0, and that would be more linked to both the physical manufacturing to building redundancy, so we're not so dependent on imports and exports, but also will re-establish the connection between innovation, product design, and manufacturing. We might see a transition from the perspective of export processing zones to more integrated manufacturing and innovation hubs, which are more self-reliant and might be embedded in areas of excellence, also from social and environmental perspectives. So COVID is with us and will stay with us as an unwanted business partner and societal partner. We cannot afford to wait and sit it out. We have to actually, our actions today have to be really focused to enable the MSMEs to work their way out of the crisis, not just with only a cash injection, but also looking at the structural weaknesses which have to be overcome.
As the chair of the investment committee, I get to see all these at first hand. Picking up a little bit on what Renee was saying, I'm actually going